Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're probably best known for their different kinds of IPAs, you know, New England's, West Coast's and black IPAs, but they do a number of other styles as well, and I've found that those also tend to be pretty solid. So it's probably fair enough to describe this brewery as being very solid all round. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that we've had from them maybe 2 or 3 times before, if memory serves me correctly. It's one that I know they can do very well, and they're also saying now that they do this style once a year. So this seems to be 2022's release, and it is supposed to be quite a nice version of that style as well. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up toward Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we review the Gothenburg beers, just because it's channel tradition these days. But for this review then, we are going to go to the Gamla area and have a look at yet another beer from Spike Brewery. So this particular beer is called Spectre. It comes in at 10% ABV, and they're describing this one as a coconut vanilla double mash Imperial Stout. So yeah, this beer was released in March of this year, so this is one that I've been sitting on for a little while, but it was part of the Lokalt Osmoskalig assortment, and it's the first Imperial Stout we've had from these guys in a good wee while, if memory serves me correctly, but it must be about the 3rd or 4th one that we've had from them in total. But yeah, I've not had a coconut and vanilla Imperial Stout in quite some time, so this should be a little bit of a nostalgia trip we'll just need to see. But yeah, let's crack on with it then and see what it's going to have in store for us. The Spectre Imperial Stout from Spike Brewery in Gothenburg. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Spike Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at the brewery notes, and I'll tell you a bit about Spike Brewery once again. So, Spike Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded back in 2014 by Mats Westberg, Marcus Oxberry and Martin Johansson. So all 3 of these guys had worked previously in the IT industry, but it's now only Mats and Marcus that are still active in the company, and they now have David de Sursi, who came into the company and is now the CEO, and he seems to be really quite instrumental in driving a lot of the things that are going on there. But the main brewer until March of 2021 was Bernardo Gava from Brazil, and he trained in brewing at VLB down in Berlin and then joined the company in 2017. And at the moment these guys are producing around 250,000 litres of beer per year, and for a long time about 25% of that volume was being used for contract brewing other breweries' beers. I think they were brewing for a number of the kind of gypsy breweries that were operating in Gothenburg actually. But the brewery itself can be found in the old Slakthuis in the Gamla area, and they had an on-site tap room there which was opening up on Saturdays and serving food sometimes as well. I actually filmed an out and about video there back in 2019, if I remember correctly. So if you want to see what their old tap room looked like, you can go ahead and have a little look at that. But they announced in November of 2021 that they were going to move to another unit just across from the first brewery, and the new brewery, when it's fully operational, will be able to brew 500,000 to 600,000 litres of beer per year, and they're also working on a 150-seater restaurant there. And they had almost completely moved into the new premises by mid-2022. But the new brewer is Carl Janrud, who previously worked for Beersmiths, and he also worked under Bernardo for a period of time as well. But as of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 160 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I said to you, they do a variety of different styles, mainly different kinds of IPAs. They're pretty solid when it comes to the New England Hazies. They've done a number of West Coast ones over the years, but I would recommend in the IPA category that you try anything that has business in the name. Those ones always tend to be pretty good, the business series. But yeah, every so often you'll get a black IPA from them, you'll get an Imperial Stout like this. I haven't seen too much in the way of lagers actually for a wee while, but yeah, that maybe is something we'll start to see from them now that they've got their new brewery up and running. But yeah, as I say, that's everything I can really tell you about Spike Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, once again, this is a 440ml can. I forget how much I paid for this beer because I did buy this one a few months ago and didn't put a priority in it because it is an Imperial Stout and these beers will last for quite a while. But as we said earlier on, this one comes in at 10% ABV. They're saying it's a coconut and vanilla Imperial Stout using the double mash method, which we'll talk about just in a little minute. But there you can see the Spike Brewery symbol, plain silver top on the can there, as we said. So yeah, I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of the can or whatever. Let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. Just be careful with it as we open it. And there we are. Oh, quite a big whiff of coconut there as I opened up the can, but not going to complain about that. So I think at that we probably have about 3/4 of the beer out and into the glass. So before the head disappears, we'll take a quick look at that. So as you can see, the beer's poured with about a half finger of a frothy, I would say medium to dark tan head. One or two kind of big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass as well. A few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, but the head is very quickly fading away to be a thin kind of foamy layer on the top, and it's got a nice kind of foamy or bumpy ring on the outside there. But yeah, if I bring that up to the camera, you can see that it's quite an interesting head on this one. You can see medium-sized bubbles and a few kind of bumpier things further up, but it does look pretty nice actually. You can see the colour of this beer is pretty much what you would expect of the style, a lovely kind of dark ebony rosewood colour. Now that the beer's settled a wee bit, I really don't see much in the way of visible carbonation from this one. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect the colour of it as well. But yeah, when it comes to black beers like Imperial Stouts or Imperial Porters and things, it's very, very difficult to, it really is very difficult to change the colour of the beer with by barrel aging and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really quite interesting. I've only ever seen that done once with an Imperial Stout, and that was, I believe, from Puhasta or Pojala in Estonia, and they used beets in the beer, which was really kind of unusual. But yeah, as I said, this one goes together and appears pretty much as you would expect from the Imperial Stout style. So yeah, I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of this beer, but we can have a look at the aroma and just see how it goes together. This should be quite interesting. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, it actually has quite a straightforward aroma, but it's just really pleasant. Sometimes simplicity is the best. But yeah, it's nice. I mean, as I say, it's a double mash vanilla coconut Imperial Stout. You get the big stickiness out of it, you get some of the coconut, and you can get the vanilla. It's, you know, it really is what it says on the tin, quite literally. Yeah, this is nice. So, yeah, on the overall, I'd say it's a kind of, this one stylistically, just from the judging the aroma, it's not a pastry stout, definitely not. But it also has a lot of sweetness to it at the same time, and it's not a Russian Imperial Stout either. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. I think we're going to get a bit more complexity out of this one in the flavour than we are in the aroma, to be quite honest with you. But we'll do our best. We'll break it down and just describe it for you a little bit more in depth, actually. So let's have a wee look at this one then. So the backbone of the beer. I would say it has a little bit of that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust that you'd expect of an Imperial Stout, but not overly much. I mean, it's quite a popular thing to use black malt or special beer or something like that. But that, in a Russian Imperial Stout where you have that roasty, toasty side of things, such as you would find from, say, Nerd Brewing or something, you are going to get, you will get more of that character being a little bit more prominent than others. But yeah, the way that this one goes together, I think, is quite interesting in that regard. So yeah, you have a little bit of that kind of, you do have a little touch of that well-fired kind of morning roll bread crusty character in there. A little bit of it, but not too much, as I said. On top of that, you've got a nice little touch of woodiness to the beer as well. Kind of a dry woodiness, actually. But then on top of that, there's a little bit of a kind of rye bready character. Nice kind of rye brown bready note. And then above that, there's some kind of wholemeal brown bready character as well. So yeah, a little bit of a more kind of grainy and slightly caramelised rye bready character, a little bit of wholemeal brown bready character, as I said. And then, yeah, on top of that, you're getting a few other things. I mean, I can smell, there is a good little bit of the coconut coming out of this one, and it kind of feels like it's mixed in with the brown bread and things like that, which I do really like. But then, yeah, a little bit of coconut in there, and a little bit of a nice kind of brown bready character, and yeah, the way that that goes together is really quite nice. So yeah, that is quite interesting how that pieces together in this one. But yeah, on top of that, there is a little bit of a chocolatey character to this one, and it's kind of more of a milky chocolate actually. And I'm guessing it's the vanilla that's kind of aiding in that, because the vanilla and the chocolate, it's kind of mixed together a wee bit. You do get a little bit of this kind of drier cocoa nibby sort of thing coming out of the beer, but you do have more of like a milky 40-50% cocoa chocolate coming out of this one, so that's nice. So yeah, more milky kind of cocoa nibby chocolate coming out of this one. But yeah, the way that goes together is really quite interesting too. So yeah, on the brown sugary side of things, you do get, there's a little bit of a kind of leathery brown sugary note in this one, but not too much. As I say, there's usually two things you can do with Imperial Stouts. You can use the double mash method, which gives you like a really big kind of thick sticky mouthfeel, and that can add a little bit of complexity to the beer. Otherwise you can use a longer wort boil, and that gives you the more kind of caramelised sugars, and it quite often gives you a bit more of a woody, and it quite often gives you a little bit more of a kind of woody and kind of nutty sort of base to the beer. So that can be quite an interesting thing to do as well, but you can kind of smell the stickiness and thickness in this beer, which is really interesting. But yeah, on the on that note, like, you do get a little bit of a toasty brown sugar in this one. There's a wee bit of like a dry caramelly note, and also a little bit of yeah, there's also just a wee bit of like a sweeter caramel in the middle of the nose too. But yeah, it's interesting how this pieces together. The vanilla, as I say, really mixes in with the chocolate, and yeah, it's nice, this one. I do like the aroma, but as I say, it's not the most complex of aromas in that sense. It's actually quite straightforward in many aspects. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of things. We can focus a little bit more on the hoppy side of the beer. So there's a little bit of the earthiness in this one for sure. It was also getting a little bit of herbal character. I mean, you have to remember that Imperial Stouts are not the most hop forward styles of beer. The focus, of course, is on the malts and things like this. But yeah, a little bit of an earthy character in there, a little bit of a herbal note, and then yeah, you've also got a wee bit of a kind of floral aromaticity going on in this beer as well. So yeah, that's kind of nice. There's a little bit of floral aromaticity and a bit of grassiness in there. But yeah, of course, the grassiness and floral notes are a little bit more prominent. But yeah, you have got the earthy, the smoother earthy and herbal character sitting in behind this one as well. So yeah, I think aroma-wise, it adds a bit more depth to the beer, that's for sure. On the fruity side of things, again, it's quite a mild-mannered beer in that sense. There's a little bit of a kind of juicy plum, a little bit of a black currant, but you're not getting the sharper raisins or black berries that you might often get from this style. Actually, it's as I say, a very mild-mannered beer, this one, in terms of its aroma. If you sugar it up a little bit, you do get a little bit of a raisiny sharpness, but other than that, it's yeah, other than that, there's not too much to report on the fruity side of things. So yeah, interesting aroma, this one. Very mild-mannered, as I say, but I think we'll get a bit more complexity out of this one when we actually taste the beer. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think we should put the rest of it into the glass and just see what it's all about. So yeah, let's have a look at this one then. This one is the Spectre, a 10% double mash Imperial Stout with coconut and vanilla added into the brew from Brewery in the Gothenburg area in Gothenburg. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, to say, that is pretty nice actually. And as I was saying, it does have a good little bit more complexity to it in the flavour than the aroma would have you believe, and it has a little bit of that Russian Imperial Stout quality to it as well. But yeah, another very solid Imperial Stout from Spike Brewery, so it's a thumbs up from me. Yeah, so where do we start with this one then? Yeah, it's good. Let's say it sweetens up. The thing I'm finding with this beer, it's a bit roasty and toasty in the beginning. You get a bit of booze out of this one. Has got a lovely oily bit of sweetness to it as well. And yeah, it's really nice. As I say, it's a really, really quite nicely done beer, this. Yeah, it shows you a wee bit of everything on the stout spectrum actually. But let's try and break this beer down and describe it a bit more in depth as we always do. So yeah, middle third of your palate. The backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust there. That is absolutely the backbone of the beer. If you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more woodiness and stuff out of this one, which I think is really nice. Yeah, roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, which does get drier and drier into the aftertaste. A little bit of a woody character as well, as I've said. And yeah. On top of that, you start to get some of the other elements kind of coming out of the beer. So above the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, you get a little bit, you can feel there's a layer of a kind of more airy and slightly crisp rye bready character coming out of the beer, and that's really interesting too. So, on the rye bready side of things, that does actually get a little bit sweeter the further into the aftertaste that you go. But above that, you get a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bready layer, and you can feel some of the coconut in there toward the front of that middle third of your palate on that layer. It's very layered, this beer. So bread crust, rye bread, wholemeal brown bread. The kind of coconutty characters for me are sitting in that wholemeal brown bready layer, and you get some of the vanilla coming out of the beer in that sense too. But then above that, you have a layer of what feels like a kind of more chocolatey and coconutty sort of sponge cake. So yeah, that's really interesting. I have to say with this one, I do think the vanilla takes a bit of a back seat in the beer to the coconut and the sort of Russian Imperial Stout side of this beer. So that's quite interesting. I thought this was going to be a kind of more sweet stout from the aroma, but that's one of the areas where it diverges a little bit from. That is one of the areas where it diverges from its from what you'd expect. So, yeah. The way this one kind of goes together in that sense as well is very nice. It's, you get more and more out of this beer in the aftertaste too. It comes in very sweet and it just gets progressively more kind of dry and roasty and toasty actually. So it's nice. It really is nice. On top of the kind of sponge cakey layer, then you've got a little bit more of a kind of chocolatey layer to the beer too, so you can feel at the back of that middle third of your palate, the chocolate has a bit more of a kind of roasty and charred type character to it, but as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it very quickly mellows out and gives you a sort of 60% cocoa chocolate, and as you move toward the very front of that middle third of your palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of 30-40% milk chocolatey type character to it. So that's quite interesting. One other interesting thing I would say about this beer is that it doesn't have so much in the way of brown sugars. But in fairness, you do get more and more of them the further into the aftertaste you go as well. Yeah, so you can feel above the chocolatey layer, there is a little bit of a slightly toasty, there is a little bit of a kind of toasty, brown sugary note out of this one. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of roasty, toasty note out of this one. As I say, then you've got a little bit of a sweeter caramel, a bit of a dry caramel actually, in the middle third of your palate too, or just in the very centre of your palate actually, which is obviously going to be related to the alcohol content of this beer, which at 10% ABV is considerable. But I think on that note, I think we've covered everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate, and that's where the complexity in this beer is. So let's go on to the back third of the palate then. As I've often said, the further back on the palate you go, the more bitter and dry the flavours that you get out of the beer are. The further forward you go, the sweeter they are, generally speaking. But on the back third of the palate, you tend to get very similar. You tend to get similar flavours, just at different intensities. But yeah, on the back third of the palate, then, so we can say you get a lovely kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired, bread crusty character coming out of this beer. And yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So you can feel that that's even drier on the back third of the palate than it is further forward. Above that, you get the kind of rye bready layer, which again feels a little bit taller and lighter and more airy. Then above that, you get a more above that, you get a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of thing, and then you get the kind of sponge cakey type layer there. So you can feel you've got all three of these layers, but they just feel taller and lighter and more airy than they do in the middle third of the palate there. But above everything else, on that back third of the palate, you can feel some of the kind of the sort of roasty, well-fired chocolate, kind of charred chocolate, sitting on top of all of it. So that's really interesting. So yeah, this is a nice roasty, toasty, well-fired, chocolatey character coming out of this one. Above that, you have a very nice kind of yeasty character coming out of the beer. So it's got it is a little bit like a kind of brown, sugary, dry, sponge cakey type note. So yeah, the way that that goes together is quite interesting, and it's wrapped in a little bit of honeycomb. It's got a bit of woodiness and crackery character to it, but the way that that goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. Again, I think that's everything we need to say about the back third of the palate, but you can definitely feel that the flavour is taller on the back third of the palate. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, that's quite interesting in this beer. So let's go on to the hoppy side of things. So in the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of you get a nice little bit of earthiness in there, and it is actually quite prominent, which builds a good bridge between the roastiness of the beer and the other aspects. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of roasty toasty character there in this one as well, and it builds that bridge with the earthiness. But as you move further forward, you get a little bit of a herbal character, and as you push further forward toward the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of floral, I would say. You do actually get a little bit of floral, like almost floral spiciness out of the beer, which is kind of interesting too. But round the front curve of the tongue, the beer's a little bit lighter and grassy. But the hoppy character, these kind of green component parts of the beer, I would say, do take a bit of a back seat to other things that are to other parts of the flavour, I would say. So that's worth bearing in mind with this one, that's for sure. So I think that's that for the hoppy side of things. Let's have a wee look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So yeah. So it really is quite sweet on the front third of your palate actually, which is interesting. So yeah, that border region between front third of your palate and middle third of your palate, you do get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there, and it's you do get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up in there. Kind of some of the rye bread underneath and the brown bread and sponge cake on top of that. I would say the base of the front third of the palate, you've got a nice kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired character in this one. Above that, you've got a bit more you do get some of the rye bread and then some of the brown bread, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's look at those. So yeah, the fruity side of the beer is actually kind of similar to what I was thinking it would be from the aroma. At the back of that front third of your palate, you get a nice kind of juicy plum in there. So yeah, a nice little bit of that juicy kind of plummy character out of this one. It's as I say, a nice kind of juicy plummy character in this one. Underneath that, you do start to get a little bit of there's a little, yeah, no, I'd say more, juicy plum on the back, the very back of that front third of your palate. As you move further forward, it gives you a little bit more of a kind of oily, figgy sort of thing. And as you move further forward into the front half of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit more blackcurrant. This beer doesn't have the kind of sharper raisiny or blackberry-ish notes to it, so the fruity character is very much kind of in keeping with what you'd expect from the aroma, in fairness. But I do like that about it, that's for sure. So yeah, it's quite an interesting one. If I think about this overall, it's got like a Russian Imperial Stout backbone to it. It's got an almost kind of pastry stout type malt base beyond that, but it doesn't have that kind of granola flavour or the really kind of like marzipan-y, candied sort of flavour you can get from these beers. It is more like a... The thing that really lingers is more the kind of roasty, toasty Russian Imperial Stout type quality out of it. Hoppy notes are nice in this one and in keeping what you'd expect, and you do have a little bit of fruitiness too. Quite, not quite as sharp a fruitiness as you'll get from some beers in this category though, but still pretty interesting. So yeah, an interesting Imperial Stout from Spike, I have to say. A little bit more, is it compared to what I remember from Spike Brewery, this one is a little bit more along the pastry lines, right enough, but it still has the old school RIS character that I remember from their other beers. So yeah, quite a cool one to try, I have to say. But let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. I'd say it's kind of bottom end of full bodied, this one, I would say, that's for sure. So, mouthfeel wise, I'd say, yeah, bottom end of full bodied, smooth carbonation, kind of a very, sort of a very slick, it's a really quite slick mouthfeel in a sense, this one. So I do quite like how that goes together, quite a slick and slightly oily mouthfeel. In terms of the hoppy kind of bitterness and stuff like that, it's quite, yeah, I'd say you'd maybe have about 60 or 70, probably 70 IBUs out of this beer, potentially a little bit more. Some of that from the roasty, toasty bitterness of the malt base, some of it from the hoppy character. The malt base, as we said, has the roastiness underneath. It's got a smooth kind of sweetness and a kind of density to it in the middle. And then you also have a little bit of kind of sweetness on top, actually. So that's kind of interesting. The fruity side of the beer, as we said, a little bit juicy, but not too much. The fruits are not the most prominent part of this beer. So yeah, it's kind of a stout that starts off quite sweet and then it sort of dries up, gets a little bit drier and things the further into the aftertaste you go. But yeah, an interesting one. You know, after 3,800 reviews, you want beers that make you think, and this one certainly has done that, actually. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one, to be honest with you. I think this has been a really interesting beer to try. So yeah, I've enjoyed this, that's for sure. So this was the Spectre, a 10% double mash Imperial Stout with coconut and vanilla added into it. That's one thing I would say, is that the vanilla takes a little bit of a back seat in this one, and the coconut's kind of mixed in with all the bready characters, in fairness, so the coconut's kind of infused. But yeah, a really interesting Imperial Stout, this one. Mainly a kind of Russian Imperial Stout, but it has a little bit of pastry stout character to it as well, I would say. But yeah, interesting stuff. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Spike Brewery as well. And we will see about returning to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys later. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.